see your little old elder millennial today. Oh, but come sit down. I have a few stories to tell you about. Oh, good. What was I going to tell you? Let's see. Oh, yes. Oh, well, you see, in our day, we didn't have these newfangled computerized telephones in our pockets or game-playing consoles in our homes. Oh, no. So if you wanted to play a video game, we had to go to a place called an arcade. Now, don't get me wrong. Arcades were hella radical. We would gather a group of our best homies together with some choice quarters, and we would rule the arcade. Oh, there was something about the abundance of neon and black lights, combined with the power of being without our parental units, and the near constant urge to have 3 letters of our name show up on the high score list. Oh, that made us unstoppable in an arcade. Now, you kids these days will never know how totally tubular it was to be inside of one. But let's see if little old DollyPop can recreate it for you. Let's go.
We're just gonna press start and get to it. Now, there aren't any cheat codes, so we must start at the beginning and make our way through this adventure. We originally were only going to make an arcade cabinet, but the more we began to reminisce, the more we realized that we really wanted to create a full arcade diorama. Here we are. I'm currently building the floor and basic wall structure out of 1/4-inch plywood from the hardware store. We cut the pieces on our table saw, and I sanded the edges with Sandy, my Dremel. Then, using basic wood glue and my homemade Lego gluing jigs, I attached the 2 wall pieces together. The gluing jigs ensure that I'm attaching the pieces at a right angle. While that dried, I began to build the floor platform. We'll want to hide some things under there later, so we want it to be raised up a bit. Once the platform was dry, I glued the walls to the platform. Okay, dolls, there is some huge news from the DollyPop kingdom. This little channel got its first partnership. I feel like DollyPop has totally leveled up. Okay, so here are the details of the partnership. xTool offered me one of their M1 machines with a few attachments and accessories for me to give an honest review in a video format. That's what the agreement stated. And if I felt like it was worth supporting, I could become an affiliate and share a link on my page. Well, I've been wanting a laser cutter for a really long time, so I almost hopped on a plane to go give everyone at xTool headquarters a collective hug for the opportunity. And now that I have one, I must say it's been like a game changer for all of my doll making stuff, as you'll probably notice by the end of this video. Using their simple layout program, we were able to cut wood, leather, plastic, vinyl, stickers, and plexiglass with less waste because the software sees the material you place inside. So if you don't use the entire piece the first time, you can reuse it again later. That was one of my biggest pet peeves with my die cutting machine. Well, suffice to say, I really like this machine, and it's much cheaper than other laser cutters on the market. I don't know about you, but my masonry skills are a bit lacking. Instead, I designed a cinder block pattern and engraved it on some thick EVA craft foam. Next, I trimmed the edges and cut out some of the blocks so 2 pieces would fit together like a puzzle.
Perfect.
Because this is a plastic foam, I grabbed my jar of contact cement. This stuff sticks to everything, and works best if you apply it to both items you're gluing together. So I apply some to the back of the foam and some to the exterior wall. Then, using a syringe, I apply some contact cement to the edges of my cinder blocks. This helps me apply the adhesive to smaller areas more neatly. Then I apply the foam blocks to the wall and trim the excess. Okay, let's make the walls look more like cinder blocks. From my pantry, I steal some aluminum foil. You don't have to use the name brand, but I find it makes me feel fancy if I do. Then I take out all of my pent-up aggression on the wall by jamming a spiky, crumpled-up ball into it, over and over. And if that wasn't enough, I use my dog's slicker brush to poke holes in it too. And if I'm still angry, I simply take a knife to it. Now, to apologize to this helpless wall, I apply Mod Podge to seal and coat everything. After allowing that to dry overnight, I do a matte black base coat. Then, to hide the fact that I dared to use a paintbrush, I stipple the paint with a paper towel. When I was the artistic director for a theater company, I had a talented assistant who coined the term, "back there, don't care," in reference to our sets looking amazing from the front, but cobbled together in the back. Which is why I'm painting black around most of the edges. If I somehow don't make something that lines up perfectly, then you'll likely never notice because it'll be back there, hidden in the black. Next, using a sponge, I stipple on a dark gray and then a lighter gray. This helps create the look of holes and highlights. Then I use a paintbrush with almost no paint on it to dry brush the edges to catch the light. Now I'm going to brew some forbidden coffee. Forbidden coffee. Essentially, I make a mixture that is 90% water and 10% paint, then just a drop of dish soap, then slather that delicious caffeinated goodness all over it. You can clean up your mess if you want to by dabbing some paper towels on it. The next part of this complete breakfast is the forbidden chocolate milk. Forbidden chocolate milk. It's essentially like the coffee, but brown. The black helps define the dark recesses, but the brown mostly makes it look dirty. Now it's time to make some magic concrete. The first step is to bake your pan of fine sand at 150 degrees Fahrenheit until the edges are golden brown. Then combine your sand with half a cup of Mod Podge and a drop of dish soap. Add the color of your choice and stir until you get lumpy peaks. I chose to make my ground platform a concrete or stucco texture, so I brushed on my mixture and let it dry for 24 hours. Then I repeated all of the same aging steps that I did with the walls, except this time I added, forbidden kale juice? Forbidden kale juice. Next, I wanted to grunge up the exterior. So we designed some gamer nerd graffiti and cut it out of thin plastic using the M1. Then I taped it to the wall and used my airbrush to fill in the stencil. While it was still fairly wet, I carefully removed the plastic and tape. Then I lightly airbrushed around the edges of the design to make it look like it was oversprayed, as well as mimic some dripping. Since we want to run some power to the inside of the building, we'll need to make interior walls. But first, I need to find some studs with my stud finder. We first cut our wall wood, and then cut thinner pieces of wood to act as studs or wall spacers. Then I performed my cinder block cha-cha again for the inner walls. Okay, I forgot to mention this the first time, but contact cement is pretty smelly, so make sure you wear a ventilator. Because I've lined up the pattern in a very specific way in the back corner, I made sure to mark the back of the walls. Arcade owners weren't dummies. They knew that in order to protect their walls, they needed to use a washable surface paint. So I chose this exterior semi-gloss black paint. And hid my paintbrush shame by stippling again. I purchased these cool UV reactive mouse pads from New Wave Toys. It's a replica of the arcade carpet that I remember from my youth. I also purchased some UV reactive paint to add to the walls. Because I used a semi-gloss base paint, I decided to start with a matte varnish. Then I tried painting the pink on top. Unfortunately, it looked pretty translucent. So I wiped that away and painted a couple coats of white primer. Then I tried the pink again, and it painted like absolute garbage. So I finally gave up on hand painting it and covered those paints with airbrush primer. Then I chose to do a base color that was similar to the UV paint hue. Then finished it off with about 4,000 coats of the UV paint. Seriously, that stuff sucks. Next, using my tiny wood router, we cut and shaped little baseboards and painted them black. I feel like baseboards really refines the look of the walls and the floor. Since we're using all of these UV reactive products, it kind of makes sense that we need to install some black lights. Using a template that we cut out of plexi with the M1, I marked out the ceiling tiles. Let's speed this process up a little bit, shall we? Next, I marked where my can lights should be placed. Once the general spots were planned, we popped the roof into the M1 and cut the holes. In my childhood, there was something called popcorn or acoustic ceilings. These seemed to be in every home, office, or store. So it seemed fitting to include some popcorn ceiling tiles in our arcade. Using my magic cement mix from earlier, I brushed it on and removed the tape while the mix was still setting up. Then I painted the entire ceiling with the same semi-gloss black that I used for the walls. Acoustic ceiling tiles without the asbestos. As with the floor, we want to hide some things in the roof. So, my wife built a frame that will house the ceiling, the electronics, and the outer roof. Using the M1, she cut a vent opening to keep the wires cool. Then she glued in some light fixtures that she designed and printed on our 3D printer. Next, we need to take care of that big gaping hole in the center. So May designed and printed this industrial-looking vent that will also help keep things cool up there. At my airbrush station, I first sprayed it with Mr. Super Clear Matte and then coated it with black paint. After it dried, I gave it a final coat of Mr. Super Clear Gloss, so it gave it that shiny metallic look. Then we installed it into our ceiling. To avoid light bleed from the LEDs, we filled in the back of everything with an opaque hot glue. To help my can lights produce the most amount of light, I make them reflective by first coating them with a gloss varnish, and then adding some of my Culture Hustle mirror paint. Finally, it was time to install the LEDs. First, we fed the sign lights through the front, then plugged the rest of the lights into their canisters and glued them in place with UV resin. Then, with light diffusing plastic, we used the M1 to cut diffusers for the white bulbs and left the remaining 14 UV bulbs open. Every arcade had neon lights everywhere. But miniature neon doesn't really exist. So we started by cutting our design out of black plexi using the M1. We were smart, and we also engraved our design on the front, so we would have some sort of path to follow. Now, because I hate using super glue, I tapped out and let my wife take the reins. She then fed 2.3mm EL wire through the back and glued it over the etching to create the letter forms. EL wire is cool because you can simply snip the extra and it still works. We repeated the same steps for our building sign too. It would be a health and safety violation if we didn't include properly marked exits. Again, we designed and cut the sign pieces out of plexi using the M1. Behind the exit letters, we hot glued in more diffusion plastic. Then superglued on the back plate. We sacrificed this double-ended USB cord for our sign. May first snipped the cord in half, then stripped it so she could remove 2 wires. Then she soldered those wires to a step-up converter. This boosts the power from 5 volts to 12 volts. We have plans of adding some more things to the arcade in the future, but for the time being, we designed a trash can to fill the space. Using some wood that we found at the hardware store that was whiteboard on one side and chalkboard on the other, we used our
all-powerful laser
to cut it into the pieces we needed. Then I started by gluing the back piece to the 2 side pieces. Then attached the bottom piece to the sides. On the inside, I glued 3 bracers that will hold the top in place. Then I attached the front. We engraved the sign plate, and then I filled it in with one of my new Posca markers I got for Christmas. Then I began to glue on the top when... Thankfully, it was okay. I didn't have any hinges, so we bent a piece of plastic into a 90-degree angle and glued it to my door and the top, and then I glued it in place. Okay, now for the pièce de résistance. One of my wife's absolute favorite franchises is TRON. So, in order to appease her, we decided to make a Space Paranoids machine. She first designed the parts in Blender, and then we cut them out of wood and plastic. In Illustrator, she recreated the graphics, and then we printed the sides on sticker paper. And the other parts we printed on a translucent acrylic called Duratrans. Because a laser would be too much for these materials, I installed the die cutting attachment and placed the sticky cutting mat inside the machine. Then placed the print onto the mat. With the xTool software, we were easily able to line up our cuts and make perfect Kiss Cut stickers. Now that everything was cut, we attached our tiny screen using UV resin. My wife then programmed the Raspberry Pi board to play segments from the game. May then printed some coin return buttons and painted the entire front black. Then she sanded them. This left the black paint in the recesses. Then she glued some red LEDs inside and tested their fit inside the coin slot panel she printed. Next, May created an array of lights to fill the marquee sign on the top of the cabinet. She was able to cut this holder for them out of black plexi. Look at how perfect the Duratrans print is. Now it's time to assemble the controller platform. Space Paranoids has a joystick with buttons and a lit mouse ball. First, we sanded a marble to diffuse light. Next, May glued 2 pieces of cut plexi to the bottom to hold the marble in place, but also allow it to rotate. Next, she built a plexi box underneath to attach some white LED lights. May 3D printed the joystick and inserted a tough piece of wire inside. Then I sanded it to smooth the print lines and painted the details. We then shoved a piece of leftover silicone from our charity doll into the box in the back, then inserted the joystick so it can still move. I started by gluing the 3-sided structure that will contain the coin box. While that dried, I began to add the textured black plastic we cut to the corresponding wood pieces. Contact cement seemed like the best choice to use here. I slathered both pieces and then carefully lined up the edges. Now that the coin box was dry, I scored and folded the plastic and attached it to the box. Then I glued the coin slot plate to the box with glue. After looking at it for a bit, I decided there wasn't enough contrast in the plate. So I went over some of the edges with a silver Sharpie to make them look worn. I also added some forbidden coffee and chocolate milk. Then to create even more visual contrast, I added a satin varnish to the coin return slots, and then black 3.0 to the coin slots. To help bring back that nice plastic finish to the buttons, I painted a gloss on the front. Arcades need to be noisy, so I added one speaker for show and one working speaker. Then I glued them in place with UV resin. Then I back there don't cared the edges. With a side piece of the cabinet laying with the wrong side up, I glued the top on. Then the speakers. Then on the inside of the top and speaker pieces, I glued little brackets for the marquee lights to attach to. I used a broken side piece to help temporarily lock things in place while I installed the light array. Then I give the lights power.
Unless you've got power!
Then I begin to integrate the Raspberry Pi into the mix by attaching the power source and the monitor. The Raspberry Pi was glued to the back off screen, so now that everything is plugged in, I can glue the back to the side piece. Then I can attach the controller plate. And finally, the actual side piece. While I worked on some other things, May glued on the graphics. And attached the joystick. And the marquee graphic. And these tiny Player 1 and Player 2 buttons that she 3D printed. Then she installed the plastic siding and USB plugs. Then superglued the coin slot lights in place. We also added trim along the edges, but we forgot to record it. Then May placed our Kiss Cut stickers. Since flat screen TVs didn't exist then, I had May print a beveled rectangle, which I then sanded and then added UV resin to the top to make it crystal clear. My wife cut out a few holes out of my inner walls, and with some pieces of plexi, she added a trim around them to make them look nicer, and then glued on the exit sign. And then the arcade sign. Remember how I mentioned that neon was everywhere? Yeah, well, we decided that we needed to add neon along the ceiling too. So May cut a few pieces of black plexi and glued the pieces in stacks of 3 with shorter pieces on the inside of the sandwich. Then she attached them to the ceiling in strategic places. Next, she drilled holes to feed the EL wire through the back. Then, using superglue, she attached the EL wire to her plexi spacers to make the wire look like it was floating. Then she did the same with the second strip of neon. In the concrete base, May used Sandy to drill a hole for the power plug. Then she secured the plug in place with UV resin. Finally, we fed all the wires through and glued the walls in place. Then we glued in the carpet, making sure to line the pattern up properly. Around the front edge, we trimmed the excess. Now that the carpet is in place, we glued on our baseboards. And finished off the front with a trim of EL wire. I remember arcades having these disposable Pepsi containers. And I also had one of these Barbie cups, so I figured, why not? I first cut off the handle and then sprayed it with primer. Then sprayed the lid with an off-white and the cup with a pure white. Then I painted the outer straw blue and the hole black. Finally, we cut the Pepsi logo out of vinyl with the M1 and attached it to the cup. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making it. I know it's slightly off my beaten path, but it's doll size, so that's okay, right? Let me know if you liked this kind of content in the comments. If you're new here and you liked this project, please subscribe and turn on notifications. I'm a itty-bitty tiny creator, so every subscription, bell ringing, like, share, and comment helps my channel grow and keeps me excited to continue sharing my process with you all. Plus, I love commenting with you all afterwards. It's truly my favorite part. Oh, also, I am tantalizingly close to 10,000 subscribers. So it would be simply splendorific if you could share this video or other videos of mine with your friends. I want to thank and give huge hugs to xTool for the amazing gift and for being my first channel partner. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you had a sweet time.